Good evening. I'm going to read a story called What Grandfather Saw, written by Richard Brouwer von Gonzenbach. Even before evening falls, the moon has already appeared in the sky. Tono continues reading in his grandfather Wibowo's secret diaries. They are actually two cash books, hidden between Grandpa's administration, largely filled with numbers and tables. Only halfway through, they are described with stories, which Tono discovered when he accidentally dropped the books this morning. Very mysterious, Grandpa. Just to be sure, he turns on the lamp behind his chair so that he can continue reading in the twilight of the house. Tono didn't even know his grandfather could write so well. Grandpa Wibowo had been taught Malay and Dutch in the 1930s, when the Belanda's, the Dutch, had colonized Java and Sumatra and other East Indies islands. They were in charge, and Tono's four grandparents had to do as they were told. Then the war broke out, and the Japanese wanted to dominate all Asian peoples and have all Europeans out of Asia. Japan caused the deaths of 300,000 Romushas, Indonesian forced laborers, so Tono's parents had told him, but Grandpa wouldn't hear about it. After the war, Grandpa and other Sumatran and Japanese youngsters seized their chance and fought to create an independent Indonesian republic. Tono's sister, Amina, has already done a lot of work in the abandoned house of their grandfather, who passed away last week. 88 years is not bad for a Malay in Padang. But grandfather apparently listened to his son, the father of Tono and Amina, who loved to study in Jakarta, started a family there, and became a doctor. Mum and Dad came over from Jakarta this week, but they are ill and have difficulty walking. Amina now has to buy food and put her two children to bed. Tono does not want to join their dinner. He wants to stay at his beloved grandfather's house. He remembers his sweet, gentle grandma who picked him up, cuddled him, and gave him candies. Grandpa and Grandma often argued with each other, where Grandpa in particular could get very angry and then storm out of the house for a walk. Sometimes Tono ran after his grandfather, and then he was allowed to walk alone. On the way back, Grandfather treated him to strop susu, delicious sweetened milk. And when President Suharto, the dictator, stepped down in 1998, Tono was 10 years old as he saw Grandpa Wibowo dancing barefoot in the garden with joy. But in the weeks that followed, there was a lot of violence in the country, with his parents watching the news on television and whispering to each other. The Isha, the Islamic night prayer, is already over. Slowly shadows in the house slide across the floor and the walls. The garbage can stinks. Tono will have to empty and clean it later. Now he peers at the small, sometimes difficult to read handwriting of Wibowo, who was born in 1927, and talked about the mean white Dutch, about the colored Indian Dutch, and about the Sumatran and Javanese, who had the fewest rights. After the Dutch lost the war against the Japanese in 1942, Wibowo visits his cousin in Savalunto, who proudly shows him his uniform and the bayonet he received from Japanese soldiers. Wibowo stays in Savalunto for several months and, together with his cousin and others, receives military training from the Japanese. The house is getting darker. and Tono is hungry. He heats up this afternoon's nasi goreng, fried rice, in the microwave that Grandpa was so proud of. "The blessings of modernity," Grandpa said to him and Amina. The large lamp on the ceiling is also turned on, and the shadows flee from the room. Tono continues reading in Wibowo's diaries. The cousin tells that he and a friend robbed Chinese people during the war. Once they even set fire to a Chinese shop when the owners wanted to defend themselves. Tono shakes his head about Grandpa's wrong childhood friends. Who would the cousin be anyway? That must also be his family. Wibowo corresponds with the Pemudas, nationalist youth in Java. They condemn other Japanese people who have resisted the Japanese. After the war, the Dutch war prisoners return from the Japanese camps. Most of them are very thin and have a haggard look in their eyes. Just like animals, writes Wibowo, who is now back in Padang. He invites his cousin and their friends to come over and celebrate the independent Republic of Indonesia, proclaimed on August 17, 1945 by leaders Sukarno and Hatta, spurred on by the Pemudas. In the kampung in Padang, they plan what they can do to prevent the Dutch from wanting to take back the islands and the power. His cousin tells him about the closed coal mines, and that some of his friends want to get their hands on the mines. Some of the former mining supervisors temporarily live in a house in Padang, outside the neighborhood secured by the British. Wibowo visits the other kampungs and recruits more Indonesians to join. They want to claim the keys to the mines and kidnap the overseers to Sawalunto. Something is creaking in the hallway. For a moment Tono thinks it is his sister, and she has come back. But the dark hallway is empty, except for the hung coats and the plants on tables here and there. His grandfather's story makes Tono's neck hair stand on end. Would Grandpa have fought with the Indo-Dutch? Something is creaking again. The curtains move gently. It will be the wind. In the house next door, the neighbor's child is crying. The smell of the trash can hits his nose again. To continue reading, Tono opens the following cash book. It starts with numbers and tables, then 6 pages of religious texts before the story continues. Wibowo, his 10 comrades in arms, and a group of more than 20 armed kampung residents run through the streets of Padang, screaming and screaming, passers-by fleeing when they see them. And here the storytelling falters. Wibowo asks God several times for forgiveness. The group lights torches. Night has fallen in the streets near the sea. Wibowo hears the surf and smells the sea breeze. They surround the house, and some idiots throw their torches through the windows. A whole group of brown Indo-Dutch people flee outside and are captured. One Indonesian Dutchman has a klewang, a Royal Army saber in his hand, but it is taken from him after he has been knocked to the ground. The men yell and scream. Some captive girls are dragged to another street. Wibowo knows what terrible things are happening to them there. A young mother, her son and a young man stay in front of the house, threatened by bamboo spears and Japanese bayonets. The rest is taken to the field behind the house. Wibowo asks and calls out where the keys to the mines are, but no one listens to him. He walks into the field, asks God for forgiveness again, and then tries to question the old man and the slightly younger guy. "Where have you got the keys to the mines?" In the confusion, some boys and a girl flee. The old man turns to watch them and gets a bamboo spear thrown in his belly. He groans and sinks to the ground. The old woman next to him starts to cry, and the gunman laughs. Also Wibowo, although he himself does not understand why. Tono gasps as he reads on. The emaciated prisoners now have to dig in the ground with their hands. The Klewang man refuses and is bayoneted by Wibowo, who is laughing on the outside and crying on the inside. They are families, he understands. The old man and woman are the parents, and these are their daughters. There are too few men, but they may have been killed in the war, and the little ones are the grandchildren. A young girl is holding a baby, probably her little brother. Once the hole is dug, the man of the kampung began to laugh. The cousin from Sawaluntu snatches the baby from the girl's hand, who starts screaming until someone chops her in the face with a captured Klewang saber. The cousin throws the child in the air, and Wibowo catches the baby with the tip of his bayonet. Now everyone starts to scream and howl, and with their bamboo spears, bayonets, and the captured saber, the young men stab and hack away. Some wounded prisoners drag themselves to the beach, where they disappear into the waves. The bodies are thrown into the hole. The injured owner of the Klewang is buried alive. Behind them, the big house burns down completely. Wibowo begs for forgiveness. The kidnapped girls have been raped, mutilated, and their throats cut. They do not find the 4 refugee youths again. The mother and the 2 boys are taken by some man into the mountains. He does not know what is happening to them. He takes something from the victims, puts it in his pocket. Tono gasps again. He has heard the screams of the children as he read, the screams of the women and the pleas of the few men. He also heard the laughter of the young man, and he feels his grandfather's tears on his cheeks. His hands feel the handle of a bayonet. All this can't be true, can it? His dear grandfather. Again, a child is crying nearby. Horrified, Tono stares into the dark hallway, where the shadows of women and children stand like statues. The curtain on the window is moved by the black shadow of a hand. And the moaning of the dead, no, that's himself moaning. This is madness. The plants in the hallway are pushed aside when the ghosts start to move. The stench of the garbage can has turned to corpse smell. Tono can't breathe until he lets out a scream. He jumps out of his chair to get away from the emaciated dead, clings to the wall cupboard by the garden door, and shakes the cupboard so that a small box falls open on the floor. Slowly the shadows disappear into the wall, until only the plants and the coats remain. He leans over to the box and picks it up. It smells like incense. Inside is a pinned badge, a military sign, not Indonesian as far as he can see, and the arm of a baby doll. There are dark brown spots on both objects. Tono has to gag, and his legs tremble. He sits on the floor and lets go of the box. A stab of pain shoots through his chest. A deep sigh escapes his lips, and intense sadness makes his pores open wide. The house vibrates around him. The scent of incense from the box briefly reaches his nose again, but quickly blows away in the mysterious gust of the wind. He hears his grandfathers arguing again, and now he wonders about what, and especially why. His father was fond of Grandma, but wanted to leave Padang as soon as possible to study medicine in faraway Jakarta, where he met Mother, who was studying history. Tono decides to ask his mother what she knows about that time, whether the gruesome story of his grandfather can be found in the archives. And he must share the find with his father. He is unable to continue reading the diaries now. Perhaps it will be days before he can open them again. But he is going to reread them, that's for sure, to gather information about the victims' graves, if any. He wants to visit it during Idul Adha, the festival of sacrifice, if that is possible. Outside, the azan sounds, the mosque's call for morning prayers. Tono washes his feet and prays with tears in his eyes. The sun slowly rises as Tono walks into the garden and feels the grass beneath his bare feet. It is still nice and cool. He breathes very deeply in and out, and then in again, in, as much oxygen as he needs. The ghosts in the house have dissolved. The intoxication of atrocities disappear from his head. The honking of the baker on the road reach his ears. Then he sees the first mothers appear with their toddlers, and then some children playing. Tono wishes them luck. He hopes that the misery of the past will be spared them all. He thinks of his sister and his little nephew and niece. A tear of love runs down his cheek. That was the story. I thank you for listening. Have a good evening.